All right, ladies and gentlemen, week 3 of fantasy football sits. We're rolling quarterbacks first. Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is taking on the Denver Broncos. Listen, the defense for Denver is middle of the pack, and Baker Mayfield has 5 touchdowns and 1 interception through 2 games. And how do you go wrong throwing to Evans and Godwin? When you got those 2 guys out there, you're looking to put up yards, touchdowns, lots of points. We're also starting Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts. They're taking on Chicago Bears. Look, I know I said start Richardson last week, and it was very, very underperforming. And I know the Bears actually have a tough defense, but I expect Richardson and the Colts to get back on track. And who doesn't love a QB who's not afraid to show off his arm strength and take those deep balls? Richardson and the Colts will get back on track this week. My long shot, we're looking at Justin Fields of the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Steelers have a good odds of playing from behind and being forced to throw more, so I think those opportunities for Justin Fields are going to pick up. I mean, his completion percentage is up around the likes of Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Matt Stafford, and Brock Purdy. They just need to throw the ball more. Only 2 QBs, Derek Carr and Josh Allen, have played 2 full games and thrown less. I expect them to be throwing more this game. Sitting, we're looking Sam Darnold, Minnesota Vikings versus Texans. Looking at his stats, he sits near the top of all QBs, but he faces a Houston defense straight off a 7-sack, 2 INT, 9 tackle for loss game. His saving grace might be playing from behind. We're sitting Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys versus the Ravens. He's top 10 in attempts, but 19th in completion percentage. 2 TDs, 2 INTs. He usually puts up good yards, but he's going up against a good Baltimore defense. And the obvious sit of the week, Matt Stafford of the LA Rams versus the Niners. No Nakua, no Cup, missing his offensive line, playing a Niners team fresh off being embarrassed.
Thanks, Jordan. This week I'm covering which running backs to start and sit in week 3. Starting off, I like Josh Jacobs to start against the Titans. The Titans have been top 10 in the league in stopping the run through the first 2 weeks of the season. They're only allowing 92.5 rushing yards per game, but we saw last week what the Packers' game plan will be without Jordan Love, and that is to feed Jacobs. I expect the Packers to stay committed to the run in week 3, and it wouldn't be shocking to see Jacobs get 25 or more carries. Next up, I like Zach Charbonnet versus the Dolphins defense. Charbonnet is coming off a solid outing in week 2, where he put up 69 total yards on 19 touches with 1 touchdown. He should have a similar workload in week 3, as Kenneth Walker III will remain out for at least another week. And since the Dolphins are giving up 115 rushing yards a game, I'm expecting a big game from Charbonnet. Lastly, for my long shot start of the week, I like Cam Akers at the Vikings. Akers is only 29% owned in Yahoo leagues, and if your team is decimated by injuries like mine, he's an intriguing option. And that's because Joe Mixon is doubtful to suit up in week 3, and Akers looked good in limited usage last week where he put up 32 yards on 7 carries. This week I'm sitting Najee Harris versus the Chargers. The Chargers are tied with the Steelers for the fewest touchdowns allowed as a total defense, with only 1 through 2 weeks of play. Harris's timeshare with Jaylen Warren further reduces his value in this tough matchup. Next up, I'm sitting Devin Singletary versus a tough Browns defense that's really highlighted by their formidable defensive line. The Giants also haven't played well, and this one could get out of hand, so the Giants may be passing a lot to play catch-up. And lastly, I'm sitting Jerome Ford against the Giants. Last week, the Browns gave more carries to backup Dante Foreman, and I wouldn't be shocked to see that occur again, as Foreman is the more reliable runner between the tackles, as Ford requires big plays to put up his numbers.
These are my starts and sits at wide receiver for week 3. This week I'm starting Deontay Johnson. I think the Panthers offense is going to take a nice step forward with Dalton under center. We know Andy Dalton can distribute the ball well to the short and intermediate passing game, and Johnson should benefit from that. I'm also starting DJ Moore versus the Colts. The Colts have a fairly strong defense, but I think Moore is in for a big week as he's a hard guy to shut down. And the Colts did just give up a huge game to Nico Collins in week 1. I think it's time to pump the brakes on calling Caleb Williams a bust, and I like him to play better this week. And finally, start Brandon Ayuk. I know he came up short last week and so far this season, but Debo and Kittle are both likely going to be out, and this passing game will have to go through him. The game script could work against him, but I think there's a good chance he reaches pay dirt once or twice. And my long shot for the week is Jawan Jennings, another 49ers receiver. He's only rostered currently in 25% of Yahoo leagues, but he's definitely going to be working as the number 2 receiver in the Niners passing game this week. He's also going up against a Rams team that's depleted on the offensive side of the ball, which means the 49ers may have the ball a lot, which will lead to opportunities for Jennings. If you need to roll the dice on someone, I like him this week. I'm sitting Romeo Dubes. Lost in the Titans' lackluster start is how elite their defense has looked. They have one of the best defenses in the league, and by and large have locked down top wide receivers like TJ Moore and Garrett Wilson. Jordan Love could return, but I still expect Tennessee to play great defense. I'm also sitting Michael Pittman versus Chicago. Chicago has an elite defense as well, and Pittman hasn't been getting many looks due to the Colts focusing more on the run and downfield passing. Pittman will bounce back eventually, but I don't know if it'll be this week. And finally, I'm sitting Jalen Waddle. The Dolphins are taking a major downgrade at quarterback, and the Seahawks have been very impressive against the pass this year. Game script could go in his favor, but I just think there's too much working against him in this one.
Couple start and sits for you at the tight end position for week number 3 of the NFL. First up, Trey McBride. He has 15 targets through the first 2 weeks, and this game looks like it'll be a shootout, so he is a must start. Next, Dallas Goedert. With Brown being out again, you have to start Goddard as he is the number 2 pass catching option in that offense. Next, for Dallas Cowboys, we have Jake Ferguson. Dak always seems to find his tight end, and with Ferguson being back and that being a high scoring game, you definitely need to start Jake Ferguson. Your long shot for the week is Pat Freiermuth. Starting to have a little consistency with Justin Fields, and Fields knew how to use Cole Kmet. Also, a quick shout out if you start at Conklin, who I've been talking about the last 2 weeks, or this week pick him up on the waiver wire. Your six, you have Travis Kelce, only 7 targets through 2 games. It looks like the Chiefs are really starting to shift to their young wide receiving core, and Dalton Schultz. It's tough when he's the number 4 pass catching option at best in that really high powered Houston Texans team. Here are a couple of start sits for you on defense. First, the starts. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bo Nix has been the second worst quarterback except for Young, and that's saying a lot because there's not been that great quarterback play, and Denver just does not have that much of talent, so start Tampa Bay. Next, start Cleveland Browns. The Giants are terrible, and the Browns should have a good day. Finally, the Kansas City Chiefs. They have a top 15 defense, and the Falcons look to be very meh this season, except for Bijan, who you should always start. Next year, long shot, the Green Bay Packers. I can't believe I have to keep saying that. They're owned in only 29% of the league, so start them if you need someone. They have a legit defense, and they have first round picks all over that are finally coming together, and the Titans are terrible. Next, your sits, the Dallas Cowboys. Did you see what Kamara did last week? And, they're going up against the Ravens, who have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson should run all over them, so sit the Cowboys. Next, the Buffalo Bills. I would sit them. They're playing the Jaguars, who look like they really need a get-right game to save their season, so sit the Buffalo Bills, whose defense has been trending down the last 2 years. Finally, the Minnesota Vikings. They're playing the Texans, and the Texans just have such a great receiving core, even though they're on their third string running back, but Akers should be serviceable, so I would sit the Vikings this week.